October 11th, 2025. The Ukrainian army launched an intense drone attack against Russian forces in the city of Donetsk during the night. Ukrainian troops targeted major military facilities belonging to Russian forces. This operation was not carried out with a single drone. The troops launched an attack on enemy military facilities using a large swarm of drones. This large-scale attack dealt a major blow to the occupying forces in the Donetsk region. The Ukrainian army ensured the success of this operation by using night vision and thermal vision Kamikaze drones. The images clearly show Russian military facilities burning after the attack from different points in the city. The successive attacks by Kamikaze drones caused violent explosions. October 10, 2025. The Ukrainian intelligence service continues to revolutionize this war. Firepoint FP2 drones are being used to carry out precision strikes on Russian bases. Compared to its predecessor, the FP1, the FP2 has a shorter range, 200 kilometers, but increased carrying capacity, carrying a large warhead weighing 105 kilograms. In other words, it is designed to destroy targets near the front line or front rather than for deep strikes. These drones can neutralize targets such as logistics depots, vehicle convoys, and command posts in a single strike, weakening field morale. However, the reduced range requires launch points to be close to the front lines, increasing deployment and logistical risks, as well as the likelihood of being intercepted by electronic warfare and short-range air defenses. Ukrainian forces are successfully attacking the enemy's most important targets using this new warhead. These high destructive munitions render the enemy's logistics networks, warehouses, and production facilities virtually unusable. The intelligence service's execution of such important operations at night further increases the success rate. To strike the enemy at night, there is only one thing left: overcoming air defense systems. October 4th, 2025. A Ukrainian Air Force fighter jet took off from the runway. The pilot's target was Russian ground forces hiding in a building. This fighter jet was equipped with special guided bombs. The pilot reached the enemy target in a short time. He locked his guided bombs onto the building where the Russian ground forces were hiding. Seconds later, the bombs were fired. The bombs that reached their target completely destroyed the building where the Russian ground forces were located. October 9th, 2025. The Ukrainian Army's Heavy Mechanized Brigade carried out a significant operation against enemy forces in the direction of Kupiansk using unmanned aerial vehicles. During the operation, the units targeted a Russian D-30 howitzer. The Kamikaze drone locked onto the enemy howitzer hidden among the bushes and struck it with precision. After the explosion, Russian soldiers in the area began to panic and flee their positions. This movement made them visible. After destroying their first targets, the Kamikaze drones headed for enemy targets hidden deep in the forest. This is where the vampire drones came into play. Unlike kamikaze drones, these drones destroy enemy targets by dropping bombs on them. The units were moving in a coordinated manner. This is how a generator used by Russian soldiers is marked. A bomb was then sent from the drone. The bomb, finding its target, blew up the generator. Russian forces had stockpiled a large amount of ammunition in the area. With the coordinated work of the kamikaze drones and bomb-dropping drones, enemy targets were destroyed in a very short time. October 6, 2025. Footage released by the Ukrainian army shows Ukrainian fighters in clashes near Novolenivka. Russian forces launched an intense armored vehicle assault to break through Ukrainian positions. Heavy clouds and rainfall in the sky. The dense fog that descended upon the ground was part of a plan by the Russian army to launch a covert attack. They believed Ukrainian drones would not detect them. That is, until the kamikaze drones collided with Russian tanks. Ukrainian forces had managed to uncover the enemy's cunning plan much earlier. After waiting for the enemy to enter the attack zone, they launched an intense kamikaze drone attack. Kamikaze drones crashing into Russian BTR armored vehicles caused violent explosions. The enemy crew panicked. They immediately tried to move in different directions. They also abandoned their armored vehicles. However, the kamikaze drones had taken on a hunter mode. There was no escape for them. After one explosion in the armored vehicles, a second explosion immediately followed. A veritable scrapyard of armored vehicles was beginning to form in the area. The enemy crew and armored vehicles could not withstand this intense attack. The armored vehicles were now immobilized. The successive explosions lit up the sky. Shrapnel fragments flew into the sky. Many attack groups in the Ukrainian army had acted in coordination during this assault. Even enemy vehicles attempting a final retreat could not escape destruction. October 6, 2025. Troops in Ukraine's Kramatorsk region faced a sudden Russian attack. The Ukrainian army was holding the area tight. The sound of Russian tanks' tracks could be heard from far away. The troops reacted quickly to destroy the enemy's armored vehicles. Kamikaze drones, moving in swarms, began tearing apart enemy armored vehicles like predatory animals. After the attacks by FPV kamikaze drones, clouds of flames rose into the sky. The enemy's armored assault attempt failed. The Army's artillery units stand ready around the clock to destroy enemy targets. As soon as intelligence reports reach them, they begin warming up the artillery barrels. Enemy coordinates are precisely adjusted. Shortly thereafter, a deafening explosion sends the artillery shell toward the enemy target. On the ground, reconnaissance drones continuously track the positions of enemy soldiers. Patience is required to identify the deployment points of Russian soldiers on the move. The reconnaissance drones attempt to determine the enemy soldiers' route of movement. They then relay the necessary coordinates to the artillery unit. The artillery's barrage renders the enemy soldiers ineffective. Russian infantrymen hiding inside buildings cannot escape artillery fire either. Ukrainian soldiers were not only fighting the enemy on this land, they were also helping civilians in need in the region. At that moment, only one house was lit up in the village of Novohrihorivka. An elderly woman and her grandson lived there. They were unable to leave the village on their own. After the Ukrainian army identified this situation, experienced soldiers were dispatched to the area. The soldiers' mission was to evacuate these two civilians without an attack. Therefore, this evacuation operation was carried out on foot. The soldiers took the two civilians from the village with them and set out to traverse difficult and dangerous roads. There were numerous enemy traps in the area. There could have been a sudden attack or ambush. To protect against such attacks, reconnaissance drones were constantly present along the evacuation route. While the soldiers carrying out the evacuation task were traversing the difficult roads, the reconnaissance drones were moving ahead and relaying information that the route was safe. This journey lasted for hours. Ultimately, Ukrainian soldiers successfully completed the operation and managed to evacuate civilians to a safe area. October 5, 2025. Russian soldiers were using a boat to cross the river in Kherson and infiltrate the wooded areas. As the infantry advanced rapidly across the river, Ukrainian forces launched a kamikaze drone. The drone operator locked onto the enemy boat. After silently waiting in the sky, the operator launched a fierce attack just as the enemy boat was crossing over. October 7, 2025. A significant Russian air defense system was detected on Ukraine's northern border. Troops immediately sprang into action. It was part of Russia's most powerful air defense system, the S-400. Ukrainian drones silently advanced toward the enemy target. The Kamikaze drones carried special explosive munitions. Upon reaching the target, the Kamikaze drones attacked from low altitude, striking the enemy target and causing significant damage to the system. October 5, 2025. These are Russian motorcycle groups. They wanted to break through the Ukrainian defense by moving quickly. However, the unmanned aerial vehicles appearing on the horizon were moving faster than them. After the first strikes from the Kamikaze drones, the enemy soldiers on motorcycles were forced to jump off their vehicles. They had thought they could be fast in open terrain. However, the sharp maneuvers of the Kamikaze drones caught them off guard. They were helpless. The enemy soldiers, whose motorcycles had been destroyed, were desperately trying to escape. The sound of the drones after their motorcycles were destroyed terrified the enemy soldiers. A Russian soldier lying on the ground immediately tried to fire his weapon at the approaching Kamikaze drone, but he couldn't escape the collision. The other infantrymen immediately tried to run away. The drone operators were locked onto their prey. They wanted to catch them in one fell swoop. The enemy soldiers, who attempted a brief escape, were stopped by a sudden maneuver and faced their inevitable end. Enemy soldiers used thermal tents to hide from the unmanned aerial vehicle. The soldier who sees the Kamikaze drone immediately jumps into his tent. This shows his helplessness. The enemy tries to outsmart the technology, but a powerful explosion occurs. The skillful movements of the drone operators can even neutralize enemy soldiers hiding in the bushes. October 2, 2025. The Russian army does not just treat its enemies ruthlessly. Even their own comrades are insignificant to them. Ukrainian forces had spotted an enemy soldier in dense vegetation. A guided FPV Kamikaze drone immediately headed towards the enemy soldier. Locked onto its target, the drone operator carried out a very precise attack, gliding down from the sky. It hit the Russian infantryman squarely. The infantryman was wounded by this effective explosion. However, shortly after the explosion, a second Russian soldier came to his wounded comrade's side. The Ukrainian force's observation drone was preparing for a second strike. The drone operators thought the approaching enemy soldier would take his friend and leave the area. Everyone expected him to rescue his friend, but something different was about to happen. Instead of rescuing his wounded friend, the Russian infantryman was busy stealing his belongings. These images resembled a player looting in a game, but no, this showed how ruthless these Russian soldiers were. They didn't care about the lives of even their own comrades. Noticing this, the Ukrainian soldiers immediately took up attack positions with a second FPV drone. The looting enemy soldier noticed the Kamikaze drone right during the attack and immediately disappeared into the trees in the wooded area. This video shows how far the war between Ukraine and Russia could go. Advancing technological systems now show that wars can be fought from miles away. The high use of drone systems in particular has turned them into tiny monsters. As Ukrainian soldiers head out on a mission, they are subjected to successive kamikaze attacks by enemy Russian forces. In such situations, the most important thing for soldiers is attention and reflexes, because escaping a drone is almost impossible. But a sudden maneuver can take down a drone. Even 40 kilometers away from the front line, safety has become an illusion. A simple resupply mission can turn into a fight for survival in seconds. In footage shared by the brigade, a Ukrainian vehicle narrowly escapes a kamikaze drone. One wrong turn could have meant the end. The front line no longer starts at the trenches. It extends everywhere. Soldiers are adapting, learning to move faster than machines, to hide and to react. Every attack avoided is a victory. Every return from a mission a reminder. Technology can reshape the battlefield, but it is still human resolve that determines survival. October 7, 2025. The Laser unit carried out an incredible operation. A Ukrainian Kamikaze drone silently approached a truck carrying Russian missiles in the direction of Kursk. The drone operator deliberately landed on the truck carrying the missiles. Afterwards, it began to move silently along with the enemy vehicle. The enemy crew, unaware of this silent passenger, proceeded toward the command center. The Ukrainian Kamikaze drone traveled approximately 15 kilometers with the enemy truck. Moreover, it did so without being detected by the enemy during the journey. The units used the drone to track the enemy signal step by step. They also found an opportunity to attack the enemy. Finally, the enemy vehicle reached the command center. This silent passenger was still waiting in place. Shortly thereafter, Russian soldiers noticed this silent and deadly passenger. At first, they couldn't believe their eyes. They even started recording videos with their phones. They thought it was harmless. That is, until the Kamikaze drone moved. From that moment on, the Russian soldiers began to move away from the truck. Ukrainian soldiers reactivated the Kamikaze drone, pressed the detonation button, and the white light showing the explosion appeared on the drone's camera. This operation showed how far the Ukrainian army has come in drone attacks. It was an attack that showed precision, meticulousness, attention, and intelligence.